The day I was supposed to marry Seraphine, she stood in front of the entire imperial court, pointed at me, and said I had tried to poison her. Everything stopped after that. The music cut out. Guards reached for their weapons. Nobles started murmuring like they had been waiting for this exact kind of entertainment. And then I saw Adrian, my older brother, the crown prince. He was standing beside her, looking calm, almost bored. Like none of this had surprised him. That was when it hit me. This was not a trial. It was a setup, and I was already too late to stop it. When the emperor asked if I denied the charge, I looked around and realized every part of the scene had already been prepared. The physician was ready. The servants were ready. Even the temple witnesses had that righteous look on their faces before I said a single word. There was no point arguing. Then Seraphine leaned in close and whispered, "Adrian promised me a throne. You only offered me your heart." That line killed whatever was left of the old me. The emperor stripped me of my title, my inheritance, and my future in less than a minute. Then he ordered my mana cord destroyed and my body thrown into the Ashen Pit. Everyone knew what that meant. The executioner shattered my mana core in front of the whole court. By sunset, they threw me off a cliff and into the dark. I woke up on stone with blood in my mouth and something moving around me in the shadows. Corpse hounds. I had no mana, no weapon, and more broken ribs than I could count without touching them. So I fought the only way I could, with a snapped chain, a loose rock, and pure hatred. By morning, the hounds were dead. I was not. That was the first time the Empire failed to get rid of me. The pit was supposed to finish me. Instead, it stripped away everything soft and useless. Down there, I learned fast. I learned which tunnels carried poison mist, which glowing roots you could eat, and which ones would kill you slowly. I learned how to sleep with one eye open and one hand wrapped around something sharp. Eventually, I found a skeleton in scholar's robes slumped in front of an iron door covered in symbols older than the Empire itself. I only touched the ring on its hand because I had already run out of better ideas. The cavern lit up. A voice spoke inside my head. Bloodline confirmed. Authority returned to surviving heir. The door opened. Behind it was an underground archive hidden beneath the mountain, full of things the Empire had clearly tried to erase. Weapons, beast records, old texts, seals that still hum with power. And that was where I learned something worse than the betrayal at my wedding. My bloodline had been buried on purpose. Before I had time to understand what that meant, the archive began some kind of inheritance trial and rebuilt the ruins of my mana center into something new. A ruined core. It felt like somebody had replaced part of my chest with a second heart made of fire and broken glass. The archive forced knowledge into me after that. Beast paths, poison arts, battle sense, and one ability I understood immediately was dangerous. Fate Archive. It let me glimpse key moments before they happen and spot the weak point in a fight before the other person knew they had one. The price was simple. Every deep use burned part of my lifespan. I accepted that faster than I should have. After what had happened, living carefully no longer interested me much. The archive trained me for months, if you can call relentless punishment training. Then I found the egg. It sat behind a barrier with half a warning carved into the floor, black as pitch with thin gold cracks moving through the shell. Highly dangerous. That sounded like exactly what I needed. I cut my palm, let the blood hit the shell, and the barrier came apart instantly. The creature that hatched was smaller than I expected and somehow even ruder. It had dark scales, scraps of feathering, hooked talons, and the kind of eyes that looked insulted by the world in general. It bit my finger, forced the contract its own way, and climbed up my arm like the decision had always been its to make. I named it Ash. Ash was vicious, clever, fast, and far too pleased with itself. We trained together until we stopped feeling like master and beast and started feeling more like two things that enjoyed surviving the same way. 3 months after my execution, an imperial cleanup team came into the upper pit expecting to find bones. Instead, they found me walking out of the dark with Ash on my shoulder. The captain recognized me immediately. I took one quick look ahead with Fate Archive, found the path that ended with obedience, and used it. I told them to kneel if they wanted to live. One soldier made the mistake of testing that. Ash scorched a line around his boots without touching skin. After that, the rest knelt fast. I could have tried marching back to the palace right then. It would have been stupid. Adrian would call me corrupted. Seraphine would act terrified. The court would bury the truth along with me all over again, so I disappeared instead. If I wanted revenge, I needed more than anger. I needed proof. I needed allies. I needed a place to build something of my own. That place was Blackwater Academy. I entered the city under a false name, Rowan Gray. On my first day there, I saw a group of rich academy hopefuls shoving a girl into the mud while they crushed her medicine bottles under their boots. I used Fate Archive on her and saw enough to know she mattered. Her name was Mira Vale, and one day important people were going to depend on her. One of the boys asked if I had a problem. I told him yes, and the biggest one was that he was still talking. His beast lunged first. Ash dropped it so quickly the crowd barely had time to react. Then I made the boy pick every herb out of the dirt. That was how Mira met me. That night, I went underground and found Dorian Flint in a beast arena, getting cheated in front of a crowd that thought pain was funny when it happened to the poor. Fate Archive showed me what he could become, a commander, the kind armies remember. So I stepped in, let Ash embarrass the arena champion, handed Dorian part of the winnings, and told him to find me if he was tired of losing under Fool. By morning, both Mira and Dorian were outside my door. That was the start of my faction. Not built on bloodline or status. Built on people the Empire had underestimated. Blackwater noticed me quickly after that. The entrance assessment pillar nearly broke trying to read me, and once Ash showed himself in a ring of dark fire, everyone in the academy started paying attention. That brought Lucian Voss to my doorstep, because men like Lucian always think public humiliation is something that only happens to other people. He challenged me. Ash dismantled his beast so badly, the crowd treated it like a lesson. After that, Blackwater stopped seeing Rowan Gray as just another stray. I became a problem, a visible one. That helped. So did the ruins beneath the academy. They connected to the same hidden network as the archive under the Ashen Pit, and down there I met Director Varys, who was too sharp to fool for long. He showed me a damaged crest tied to the ruin line and told me the one thing I had never let myself consider. My mother had not died naturally. Officially, it had been fever. Varys believed it had been murder, and that my family had been targeted long before Seraphine ever betrayed me. That changed the shape of everything. What happened at my wedding was not the beginning. It was just the part that happened to me personally. Varys gave me a choice: disappear again, or stay at Blackwater, build influence, gather proof, and become too visible for the palace to erase quietly. I stayed. Blackwater became my battlefield. Mira rose fast in alchemy by exposing the students who only looked talented because money kept cleaning up their mistakes. Dorian tore through the strategy and combat ranks. Ash became a rumor with claws, and I kept making enemies. I won duel, rejected faction invitations, helped commoners when it mattered, and made the wrong people nervous often enough that it became a pattern. Seraphine crossed paths with me there more than once. At first, she did not recognize me. Then she started looking at me a little too long, like something in the back of her mind was trying to connect the pieces and failing. After Ash reacted badly to one of her quiet little probes, she leaned even harder into her perfect public image. More temple appearances, more soft expression, more time beside Adrian where everyone could see her. Watching her stopped hurting after a while. It started making sense instead. Seraphine had never wanted love. She wanted safety, status, a way up. I had once been useful for that. Adrian was simply more useful. Then the Empire announced the Crimson Forest Hunting Festival, which was the official name for what was very obviously going to be a trap. Varys hated it. Mira saw it coming. Dorian only wanted to know how many enemies we were likely to face. I told him hopefully enough to make the trip worthwhile. Before we left, Adrian came to a Blackwater banquet and gave one of those speeches dangerous men use when they want to sound reasonable. But when he looked at me, he paused for just a fraction too long. He did not know who I was yet. He just knew there was something wrong with the picture. In the forest, things turned ugly on the second night. An explosion tore through camp. Fire spread. Students panicked. Archers started dropping sedative bolts into the confusion. One almost hit Mira. Ash burned it out of the air. And the second the chaos started, I got calm. That was one of the stranger things the pit had done to me. I sent Dorian to stabilize the perimeter, Mira to the transport beasts, and took Ash straight for the ridge where the attackers were hiding. They were exactly what I expected. Masked operatives using noble equipment and temple-grade weapons. By morning, the official explanation blamed rogue raiders. No one with a functioning brain should have believed that. The expedition pushed deeper anyway, and that led us to an underground sanctuary tied to the same forgotten network as Blackwater and the Ashen Pit. At its center was a sealed chamber that opened only when I touched it. Inside were bloodline records and a memory crystal. The moment I touched the crystal, I saw pieces of a buried knight, my mother, voices arguing, orders for silence, a command that the ruin branch had to end. Then the crystal shattered. It still showed enough. I had been marked since birth. Adrian reacted instantly. He called the chamber heretical, the records dangerous, and me corrupted, then tried to pull everything under royal authority before anyone could think too hard about what they had just seen. I refused. The clearing split apart around us. Royal guards on one side, temple escorts on another, students frozen in between. Then Seraphine finally said the name she had helped erase. Kaelin. That silence hit harder than any spell. The dead third prince was standing in front of them in plain sight, and the Empire's tidy version of events started falling apart on the spot. Adrian attacked first. Seraphine came in from the side with holy binding, just like they had the first time they destroyed me. Only this time, I knew what their attack pattern looked like. I used the sanctuary entrance to narrow the angle, set a ruin array beneath the roots, and sent Ash through the blind spot Fate Archive showed me. Adrian's strike went offline. Seraphine's chains broke. The whole clearing turned into a battlefield. Dorian locked down a guard captain. Mira turned support compounds into chaos. Ash hit Seraphine hard enough that everyone watching got to see her lose control. Then Adrian and I finally met head-on. He had royal resources, polished technique, and years of being treated like the future of the Empire. I had the pit, the ruin core, forbidden training, Fate Archive, and Ash. And I had something else too. I had already lived through the part that was supposed to break me. When Seraphine tried to interfere again, I caught her wrist in the middle of her spell. The look on her face was worth every scar. All that practiced purity vanished. She just looked shocked. She demanded to know how I was still alive. I told her the pit had already contained enough monsters. Then I threw her back where everyone could see it. That mattered more than people think. Power has to look weak in public before anyone stops worshipping it in private. The fight only ended when the sanctuary started destabilizing and Varys arrived with a suppression array strong enough to force both sides to stop. Nobody walked away with a clean victory. But the Empire lost something better than a duel. It lost control of the story. Too many people had seen too much. Rowan Gray and Kaelin were the same person. The dead prince was alive. Seraphine had lied. Adrian wanted the records buried before anyone could read them. After that, everything moved fast. Adrian ran back to the capital under the excuse of emergency review. Seraphine hid behind temple walls. Rumors spread faster than the palace could stamp them out. Commoners started calling me the Ghost Prince. Nobles hated the name, which was probably one of the reasons I liked it. Back at Blackwater, the academy no longer felt like a school. It felt like the edge of a war. Mira brought word that Seraphine had disappeared from public view. Dorian said noble cadets were quietly reconsidering their loyalties. Varys moved witnesses before the palace could silence them, and I stood above the courtyard with Ash on my shoulder, looking toward the capital. By the next morning, the capital had already done what it always does best. It lied first. According to the official version, the Crimson Forest disaster had been caused by heretics and a corrupted imposter hiding inside Blackwater Academy. Adrian, naturally, was being praised for keeping the situation from getting even worse. It was a smart lie. Quick, clean, and official enough that plenty of frightened people would accept it without asking too many questions. Blackwater did not. Too many students had heard Seraphine say my name. Too many guards had seen Adrian panic around records an innocent man should have welcomed. Too many people had watched me survive the sort of death that was supposed to leave nothing behind. So rumors spread faster than the decree did. Depending on who was telling it, I was the dead third prince, the ghost prince, or the heir the empire had buried and somehow failed to keep underground. Most versions were wrong. That stopped mattering pretty quickly. What mattered was that Adrian no longer controlled the story completely, and men like him hate that more than they hate losing. I was standing above the central courtyard with Ash on my shoulder when Mira found me carrying 2 scrolls and the kind of expression that meant the news was bad enough to be useful. The temple says Seraphine has withdrawn for spiritual recovery, she said, which means she is hiding, I said. Or being hidden, Mira replied. That tracked. She handed me the second scroll. Imperial decree. Blackwater was ordered to surrender Rowan Gray for immediate transfer to the capital, not Kalen. Not the wrongfully condemned third prince. Just Rowan Gray, infiltrator, tied to forbidden ruins. Adrian was trying to drag me back under a false name so the Empire would never be forced to ask the obvious question. If I had truly died before, who had signed the order? Varys joined us a minute later wearing the look of a man who had already considered every possible disaster and disliked all of them equally. Blackwater will refuse the order publicly, he said. Mira folded her arms. Publicly? For now, Varys said. That was not reassuring. Dorian came up the stairs a moment later with a bruise on his jaw and 3 practice blades over one shoulder like he had spent his morning solving a disagreement efficiently. How long? He asked. Varys glanced toward the city wall. If Adrian is careful, days. If he is angry, hours. He was almost certainly both. That afternoon, Blackwater called an emergency assembly. Students filled the training ground. Professors lined the outer steps. House banners snapped in the wind over a silence that felt more fragile than calm. Varys announced that Blackwater would not surrender one of its students without formal review, witness testimony, and lawful confirmation of identity. It was the strongest version of no the Academy could give without openly declaring war. Some students looked impressed, some looked terrified. Lucian Voss looked like he was still trying to work out whether ambition or self-preservation would serve him better. Then the temple delegation arrived, not Seraphine. 3 senior healers dressed in white and gold, carrying themselves with the polished sadness of people who plan to do something cruel and call it necessary. Their leader introduced herself as High Sister Alira and requested that I step forward for a corruption examination. That word again, corruption. Institutions love words like that because they sound cleaner than what they really mean. Varys started to object, but I stepped forward before he could finish. If the temple wants to test me, I said, it can do it here in front of everyone. Elira smiled, but only with the part of her face she trusted. She raised a silver disc covered in temple seals, and white light spread across the platform. Students leaned in. Professors narrowed their eyes. Ash went completely still beside me. The light touched my chest. Then it hit the ruined core. For 1 second, the relic let out a sound like metal screaming. Cracks ran across its surface. The light shifted from white to black gold. Then the disc shattered in Elira's hand. The courtyard exploded. Elira recovered quickly. This proves instability, she said. No, I said. It proves your relic found something older than your temple. That changed the mood immediately, not just among the students. Among the professors, the nobles, and every faction leader who had been trying to decide whether I was worth backing or safer to avoid. Adrian wanted me to look diseased. Instead, his own side had made me look like a secret, and secrets are harder to kill quietly. The temple left before the crowd could turn any further. That bought us one night. Varys used it well. By evening, Blackwater had turned into a defensive maze. Barrier arrays lit beneath the walkways. Senior students became patrol units. Trusted professors moved witness records through hidden passages under the oldest parts of the academy. Mira converted an alchemy room into something that would have made several laws nervous. Dorian reorganized volunteers into squads so quickly and so well that even the noble-born students who hated taking orders from him ended up listening. Ash spent the evening on the roofs bullying messenger birds. I went below with Varys. He led me through the lower ruins to a sealed door marked with the same broken crest I had seen beneath the Ashen Pit. When I touched it, the door opened immediately. Inside was a narrow chamber and a single object sitting on a stone pedestal. A black iron crown. Not decorated, not elegant, not meant to impress anyone from across a ballroom. It looked heavy enough to break a skull and old enough to remember empires before this one. What is it? I asked. One of the regalia pieces of the ruined line, Varys said, or what survived. He explained that the lost branch of the royal family had ruled differently, not kindly exactly, but with far less dependence on the temple and far less willingness to share power with smiling institutions. When that branch was erased, its regalia was broken apart, sealed away, and hidden under places the empire believed it controlled. The Crimson Forest Sanctuary had preserved records. Blackwater had preserved this, and there were more pieces still missing. Why tell me now? I asked. Because Adrian is about to drag this into open conflict, Varys said. Bloodline proof alone will not be enough. People rally to symbols whether they deserve to or not. I did not like that answer. Truth should be enough. Varys gave me the kind of look older men reserve for younger ones when they are about to say something irritating and accurate. Truth usually needs banners, he said. Before I could argue, the ward stones above us pulsed once, then again, then hard enough to shake dust loose from the ceiling. Attack. We ran. By the time we reached the surface, Blackwater was already under siege. Imperial troops had sealed the outer gates. Temple casters stood behind them in formation. A suppression lattice glowed over the academy, pressing down on beast contracts and barrier arrays alike. Adrian had not come quietly. He did not look like my brother. He looked like a sentence. Students crowded the inner terraces. Professors held the stair. Dorian's squads were already moving civilians away from the most vulnerable lanes. Mira was near the triage station with enough alchemical equipment on her belt to make half the temple deeply uncomfortable. Then Adrian's voice rolled across the grounds under amplification arts. Blackwater harbors a corrupted pretender tied to heretical ruins, he said. Surrender him, and the academy will be judged mercifully. He had always liked making threats sound refined. Varys answered first. Blackwater does not surrender students to political convenience. Adrian's face barely changed. Pity, he said. Then the temple struck. White chains slammed into the outer barrier. Artillery beasts roared. Stone exploded. Students screamed. The siege had started. There was a time when seeing that much force aimed at me would have frozen me for one fatal second. The pit fixed that. I gave orders before the second impact landed. Dorian took the eastern wall. Mira handled triage and anti-sedative response. Ash stayed with me. Then we moved. The suppression lattice pressed against my bond with Ash so hard it felt like a hand around my throat. An ordinary beast handler would have folded. Ash just got angrier. To be fair, anger was one of his more useful talents. At the eastern wall, an Imperial breach squad forced its way through a damaged gate under shield formation. Dorian met them head-on with student fighters rotating behind him in lines so clean they looked practiced, even though they had been built out of panic and nerve in real time. That alone would have told me he was dangerous if I had not already known. I hit the right flank before the breach squad saw me coming. Ash tore into the rear line. Dark fire did what fear could not. The first breach failed. The second nearly came from above when temple casters redirected the suppression lattice and forced it down over the central beast courts. Ash staggered. So did dozens of bonded beasts across the academy. For one ugly second, the whole fight nearly tipped. Then Mira stepped in. She threw 3 canisters into the air and burst them with a pulse, so precise it felt insulting. Silver vapor spread across the court and collided with the temple formation in a screaming burst of interference. The pressure broke just enough. Beasts recovered. Handlers breathed. Blackwater found its footing again. That was when I looked through the smoke and saw Adrian looking right back at me. He understood the problem. This siege was not breaking the academy quickly enough, so he changed tactics and drove straight for the central tower where witness records were being stored. Of course he did. Men like Adrian do not only kill bodies, they kill memory. I went after him with Ash at my side. By the time I reached the upper landing, Adrian had already cut through the first defenders and sent the rest reeling. He turned as I arrived. For one moment, the battlefield below felt very far away. He looked calm, which meant he was furious. "You should have stayed dead," he said. "You should have done a better job," I said. That was probably the most honest conversation we had ever had. He attacked first. Imperial flame came down hard enough to split stone. I met it with ruin force and let the collision blow out the shattered windows behind me. Ash went for his blind side. Adrian was ready. A flame construct erupted from his shadow and nearly caught Ash through the chest. Nearly. Ash twisted, took the edge of it across his scales, and answered with dark fire that knocked Adrian offline for half a step. That half step was enough. I used Fate Archive. 3 paths ended with me dead. 2 ended with the records destroyed. 1 ended with Adrian bleeding. I chose the last one. The cost hit immediately. My vision blurred. My pulse kicked hard. Something inside me felt shorter. Worth it. I drove inside Adrian's next attack, took a burning cut across my shoulder, and buried a ruin-charged strike into his side. He staggered. Only a little, but it was enough. He was still stronger in raw cultivation. I was better at surviving things that should have killed me. That difference mattered. His control slipped for the first time. "Do you think exposing one lie changes anything?" he asked. "The Empire needs stability. Father chose the future that survives." That was the ugliest part. Not denial, justification. I wanted more. I wanted him to say something careless. I wanted him to admit my mother had been marked long before I was old enough to understand why the room changed when she entered it. But battle is timing, not confession. And the timing broke when the tower shook under fresh bombardment. Below us, part of the archive hall collapsed. Mira was shouting orders through the smoke. Dorian was still holding the east, but it was getting ugly. Varys was trying to keep the barrier core from failing completely. Blackwater was surviving. That was not the same as winning. Adrian knew it too. He pulled a sealed Imperial writ from his armor, and before he even opened it, I knew this was the real attack. "Emergency succession order," he said, his voice carrying over the whole battlefield. "By decree of the Emperor, the third Prince Kaelin is declared blood-fallen, stripped beyond death, and condemned for treason against the throne." The academy went still. Even the Imperial soldiers hesitated, because this was no longer an arrest. It was public erasure. Adrian raised the writ higher. Any house, academy, or temple branch that aids him will share his sentence. And there it was. Not an attack on me. An attack on everyone around me. He was trying to turn Blackwater's courage into a death sentence. For one dangerous second, it worked. You could feel hesitation pass through the academy, not because people stopped believing, because they started imagining the cost. That is how empires win when force alone is not enough. They spread fear carefully. Then somebody laughed. Mira, short, sharp, completely disrespectful. She stood below with ash on her sleeves and blood on one cuff and looked up at Adrian like he had just humiliated himself. "If the throne has to threaten children to defend its truth," she called out, Maybe its truth is weaker than its paperwork. Silence hit again, different this time. Then Dorian drove his blade into the stone and shouted, "Blackwater stands." The students answered him. Not every one of them. Enough. Enough to shake the fear loose. Enough to change the air. Adrian looked at them with open disgust. That was his mistake. One of them anyway. Varys rerouted the barrier core. Mira hit the temple formation with interference again. Dorian pushed the eastern line forward instead of just holding it. I stepped into Adrian's guard before he could adjust. Ash struck high. I went low. His flames drove us back once, then again. Then my hand closed around the writ. He tried to wrench it free. I burned rune force through my arm and tore the decree in half. The sound was small. The effect was not. Across the battlefield, it landed like thunder. That was the image Adrian should never have given me in front of witnesses. His face changed. Not the polished mask. Not royal composure. Just hatred. He answered with enough imperial fire to kill everyone on the tower if I met it directly. So I did not. I redirected the blast using the crown chamber geometry I had memorized below and let the force shear through the damaged upper walls instead. The tower came down between us. Stone crash. Flame ripped wide. Ash dragged me through the collapse with all the grace of a violent argument. When the smoke cleared, Adrian was already withdrawing under temple cover. Not a clean retreat, an angry one. Imperial horns sounded, and the siege lines started falling back in waves. They had failed to break Blackwater. What they had done instead was show everyone exactly what they were willing to do. By dusk, the dead had been counted and the wounded were filling every hall. Half the academy looked like it had survived an earthquake with political motives. No one called it a victory, but no one called it surrender either. Varys found me in the ruins of the central tower, staring at the torn halves of Adrian's decree. He said nothing at first. Smart. Eventually, he looked toward the capital and said, "The Emperor cannot ignore this now." "No," I said. "He cannot?" Mira joined us with her arm bandaged. Dorian came with blood on his collar that was not entirely his. Ash arrived covered in soot and carrying himself like the collapse of a government building reflected well on him personally. Then Varys handed me something recovered from the lower chamber during the siege. A map fragment. Black gold ink. Ancient seals. One symbol circled 3 times in a desperate hand. The capital, not the palace above. What lay underneath? There were more regalia pieces out there. More records, maybe even proof of who had ordered the purge of my bloodline in the first place. And now Adrian knew I was close enough to matter. Good. Fear moves faster once it finally has a face. Night settled over Blackwater after that. The wounded slept badly. Professors stopped pretending this was still an academic problem. The students who had chosen a side started understanding what that choice might really cost. Below us, workers cleared the courtyard, where Adrian's decree had been torn apart in public. That mattered. Stories can be denied. Images stay. I looked toward the capital with Ash across my shoulders and understood something simple. The next time I went to the capital, I would not be dragged there in chains. I would be going underneath the throne.